Alright, I should probably start by warning you that this is the least erotic thing you're going to hear all night. Maybe even if you go home and watch the Jesus Channel. I originally wrote a piece comparing my love life to a loaf of Scrapple, but decided to do something I'd written previously that's much more uplifting about being dumped. Around this time, 3 years ago, I was dumped. Well, it wasn't so much that I was dumped as that my boyfriend told me, 2 days before Valentine's Day, that he didn't see us having a future together. Which at the moment, and in hindsight, was as good as getting dumped. Earlier that night, while he was cooking dinner, I installed his wireless network and named it after what I had decided was our song, Islands in the Stream, Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton. After I washed the dishes, I walked up to him, lovingly patted his belly, gave him a big kiss and said, "I love that I fix things and that you cook." He rolled his eyes. Maybe that was too much for his oversensitive, unemployed ego. But as far as I was concerned, I was living out my progressive East Coast couple fantasy with a stay-at-home boyfriend who made me dinner. Later, in bed, right after sex, 2 days before Valentine's Day, he crushed my fantasy. What did he mean he couldn't see us having a future together? I was a catch. I was completely self-sufficient. His friends and family loved me, and after a year and a half, we were still having sex at least once a day. He was the unemployed one, the stoner. He was also the sexually satisfied one. Even stoned, there were a few things he wouldn't eat. You're breaking up with me, bastard? Tears and snot already running down my red face. Why? He looked down at his limp dick and said, as if he were looking me straight in the face, "You make casseroles and you sing bad karaoke." After 18 months, that was all he could come up with. I decided I needed to punish him. It was the only way to deal with what I was feeling. Plus, it was about 4 degrees outside, and considering I can't even handle being out in the cold when I'm happy, I was going to stay right where I was. He was never any good at dealing with me when I cried. So I buried myself in his bed, buried my swollen, snot-covered face in his pillow, and stayed up weeping and shivering next to him all night. The one time I dozed off, he sneaked into the living room to smoke a joint. I guess in my half-sleep I could feel him leave the bed because I wandered into the living room, my eyes puffy from tears and exhaustion, and asked him if he was serious. He was. How could this be happening to me? Just a year earlier, he'd made me a snickerdoodle with Red Hots, my favorite candy, baked into a heart shape, and a terms of endearment dinner, lamb chops, baby vegetables, and sweet peas. He'd seen it on Rachel Ray's 30-minute meals. I fucking hate Rachel Ray. But the dinner was wonderful, and it was the first time anyone had done anything for me on Valentine's Day, since my boyfriend in the 10th grade bought a rose off of his friend Rodney when he got to school because he'd forgotten it was Valentine's Day. It should be noted that Rodney got his roses at Quick Trip. Anyway, I crawled back into his bed and tried to cry myself to sleep. He stayed on the couch, and I was curled into a ball, alone, awake, and devastated until the sun began to come up. I took a shower and got dressed, all the while imagining he'd come tell me he'd made the mistake of his life. Anyone who's ever had her heart broken knows that in the immediate aftermath, everything in the world is 10 times more dramatic than usual. I'd never brushed my teeth with such intensity and feeling, waiting for the most important moment of my life to happen. The soundtrack to my heartbreak played in my head as I watched myself move the brush up and down, and up and down, and up and down. I didn't want to stop until he came up behind me and told me that he had been confused and lost, but the idea of me going away was just too much for him to handle. He told me those things later, when it was too late, but not that morning, not when I wanted, more than anything in the world, for him to give me my romantic movie ending. But he never showed up in the mirror, so I stopped brushing my teeth when my gums began to bleed. Or at least, once I noticed they were bleeding. I decided I would go to work, but as I started to walk out the door and he didn't stop me, I burst into tears again. Again, dramatic. It felt like the last time I would ever leave his apartment. I called into work and packed as many things as I could carry with me. I tried to be really dramatic about it all, hastily stuffing my blow dryer, my retainer, and my dirty panties in the same bag. But one can only be so dramatic when there is a retainer involved. I wanted him to see how much I hurt, and I wanted that to hurt him. If it did hurt him the way I was hurting, he didn't let it show. I must have looked really pathetic on my long, cold walk to the subway, weighed down by whatever necessities I could stuff into a Dwayne Reed bag. A man on his bike pulled up next to me to ask if I was okay and almost got hit by a bus. At least I haven't been hit by a bus, I thought, and was comforted by that idea until I sat down on the train and quickly realized that I'd rather have been hit by a bus. Again, I burst into tears and snot, looking like the crazy crying lady on the subway at rush hour. And that's exactly who I was. I went home and tried to eat. I couldn't. It was the first time in my life, save for a few times I'd had the flu, that I couldn't manage to swallow any food. I tried to sleep too, but I was awake for 36 hours before a Vicodin, red wine, and pop cocktail finally did the trick. Of course, as soon as I started to fall asleep, the phone rang. It was him. He maybe, sort of, might have made the wrong decision, but he wasn't sure. But he wanted to tell me that he wasn't sure. In the state I was in, that was enough for me to go back to sleep for a few hours. In our usual fashion, I tried to fix things. I insisted he cook me dinner on Valentine's Day. I don't remember what we ate, and we may or may not have slept together. My memory from that night is hazy at best. But my stomach was full, we smoked a bowl, and I fell asleep in his bed. It was the first time I'd really slept in days. The next morning, I moved all of my stuff out of his apartment. I hope he never figured out how to change the name of his wireless network.